The world has seen countless conflicts, but none quite like the Cold War. It was a war without traditional battlefields, without armies clashing face to face, yet it was a conflict that shaped every single aspect of modern life. For nearly half a century, two global superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, fought not with conventional weapons, but with ideology, espionage, propaganda, and the constant, terrifying threat of nuclear annihilation. This is the Cold War, explained in under 10 minutes. The Cold War truly began in the smoldering ashes of World War II. The Allies had achieved a monumental victory over Nazi Germany, but that sense of unity quickly dissolved, replaced by a growing cloud of suspicion and mistrust. On one side stood the United States and its Western allies, who championed the ideals of capitalism and democracy. On the other stood the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, aggressively spreading its communist ideology across Eastern Europe. Europe itself became the first major stage for this new global drama. Germany, the heart of the former conflict, was divided into East and West. Berlin, once the proud capital of the Nazi regime, was itself split right down the middle, a stark and powerful symbol of the world's new ideological divide. Winston Churchill, with his characteristic flair for words, famously dubbed this division the Iron Curtain, a formidable barrier, both physical and ideological, that separated the free nations of Western Europe from the Soviet-controlled states in the East. As the years passed, both sides raced to expand their influence and contain the other. The United States launched the ambitious Marshall Plan, pouring billions of dollars into rebuilding the war-torn economies of Western Europe. This wasn't just an act of charity, it was a strategic move designed to bolster these nations and prevent the seductive appeal of communism from taking root. Meanwhile, the Soviets relentlessly tightened their grip on Eastern Europe, installing puppet governments and crushing any dissent. By 1949, the tensions had escalated dramatically. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, was formed as a military alliance to defend Western nations against a potential Soviet attack. In response, the Soviet Union and its satellite states formed their own military bloc, the Warsaw Pact. The world was now formally divided into two armed camps. That very same year, a world-shaking event occurred. The Soviet Union successfully tested its first atomic bomb. America's monopoly on nuclear weapons was over. The planet entered a chilling new age of fear, a period defined by the doctrine of mutually assured destruction. A single mistake, one miscalculation by either side, could trigger a chain reaction that would erase civilization in a maelstrom of nuclear fire. Although the United States and the Soviet Union thankfully never engaged in direct, full-scale combat, their intense rivalry played out in devastating proxy wars across the globe. These were conflicts where each superpower backed opposing sides, turning regional disputes into international battlegrounds for their ideological struggle. In Korea, the Communist North, backed by the Soviets and China, invaded the South, which was supported by the United States and a coalition of United Nations allies. The brutal war ended in a stalemate, leaving Korea permanently divided along the 38th parallel line of tension that still exists today. Then came Vietnam. America, determined to stop the domino effect of communism spreading through Southeast Asia, became embroiled in a long, bloody, and deeply divisive war. Despite deploying immense military power, the U.S. ultimately faced a painful defeat, a failure that left deep scars on the American psyche. Elsewhere around the world, in Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America, the story repeated itself. Coups, revolutions, and brutal civil wars often had the hidden fingerprints of either the CIA or the KGB. The Cold War wasn't just being fought with guns and bombs. It was a relentless battle of ideas, freedom versus control, capitalism versus communism. The most terrifyingly dangerous moment of the entire conflict arrived in October 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when American spy planes discovered that the Soviet Union was secretly installing nuclear missiles in Cuba. Just 90 miles off the coast of Florida, the world held its breath. For 13 incredibly tense days, humanity stood on the absolute brink of nuclear war. Leaders in Washington and Moscow faced an unthinkable choice. But through secret bacchanal diplomacy and a nerve-wracking standoff, both sides managed to pull back from the edge. Disaster, and the end of the world as we knew it, was narrowly avoided. But the Cold War wasn't only about weapons and proxy conflicts. It was also a fierce competition for prestige and global supremacy. The space race became a dazzling theater for this rivalry. The Soviets scored early victories, launching Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite, and then sending Yuri Gagarin, the first human being, into space. These achievements stunned the world, but the United States answered with the monumental Apollo program, culminating in 1969 with Apollo 11, a giant leap for mankind as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to walk on the moon. Meanwhile, in the shadows, the world of espionage thrived. The CIA and the KGB engaged in a deadly, clandestine game of cat and mouse. Their covert operations ranged from overthrowing governments and funding insurgencies to stealing state-of-the-art military and technological secrets. At the same time, a massive propaganda war was being waged. Through films, radio broadcasts, and posters, both superpowers tried to convince the world, and their own citizens, that their system represented the inevitable future of humanity. By the 1980s, however, the Soviet Union was beginning to show deep cracks. Its centrally planned economy was stagnating, unable to keep up with the dynamic, consumer-driven economies of the West. The long, costly war in Afghanistan had become their Vietnam. Across the Soviet bloc, people grew tired of shortages and the lack of freedom, and they began to demand change. A new Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, introduced groundbreaking reforms known as glasnost openness and perestroika restructuring, hoping to revitalize the system. But it was too little, too late. The desire for freedom, once unleashed, could not be contained. In November 1989, the world watched in astonishment as the Berlin Wall, the most potent symbol of Cold War division, came tumbling down. Citizens from East and West Germany swarmed the barrier, celebrating together in a moment of pure, unbridled joy. This triggered a chain reaction across Eastern Europe. One by one, the communist regimes collapsed. Finally, in 1991, the Soviet Union itself officially dissolved. The Cold War was over. And remarkably, it ended without a single nuclear weapon being fired between the two superpowers. Its legacy, however, continues to shape the world we live in today. NATO remains a powerful military alliance, thousands of nuclear weapons still exist, and the United States emerged from the conflict as the world's sole superpower for the 1990s. The Cold War wasn't just a conflict between nations. It was a profound, half-century-long battle for the future of humanity. History is never truly behind us. The Cold War may have ended, but its lessons about diplomacy, power, and the dangers of ideology remain as relevant as ever. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to join us for more deep dives into the past. Thanks for watching.